Well, welcome to the August 9th Grants Pass City Council Workshop. And we are, the first week, I guess we're the second week of August already, but it's time to talk about Christmas. So Aaron, get us started with the holiday tree. Could never get started too soon thinking about Christmas, huh?
Meli Kalikimaka. Yes. There we go. Yeah. So today we're here to talk about actually a desire to take the lead on the acquisition of the dressing and of the tree, getting the tree and actually decorating the tree. Relationship with council goals is this supports council goal of encourage economic opportunities, specifically objective 2, enhance a commercial district to create quality shopping and dining experiences. Just some general background. Why are we talking about the Christmas tree, the holiday tree lighting ceremony and stuff like that? General background history-wise, the Town Center Association for a number of years had the responsibility of this tree, getting the tree, decorating the tree, doing an event. And ultimately, when the Town Center Association folded, they had a number of activities that they had, say back to the 50s and the tree lighting ceremony and a couple of other of those community events. The city, after some community members talked, took the responsibility on for this event that we're talking about today in the absence of the Town Center Association. We did that through providing Experience Grants Pass, which was our contract for travel and tourism, an additional $10,000 for the acquisition and the dressing of the tree. The city's general fund budget, due to financial constraints, does not represent us being involved in events anymore. And this included the tree acquisition and lighting. So currently, there's also, in discussing this with community partners, there is no community partner that's committed to taking on the holiday tree event. We had some discussions about some community members that are willing to maybe do a parade or to try to do a downtown Christmas event associated with the acquisition and lighting of the tree, but no community members stepped up to actually acquire and light the tree. So my question to council is, does council want to take the lead and step up to acquire and light the tree, which in the past, we provided Experience Grants past $10,000. We did this last year in 2020. The general cost for us, it costed about $4,500 to get the tree, and to lift the tree up and to take it down, it cost about another $4,500. So the anticipated cost, if council was wanting to take the lead role on this for 2021, could be up to $10,000. Some potential resources, if council wanted to do this, would be general fund sources of general program operations, $40,000, and we also have committee expenses of $5,000 available for council's consideration. Your call to action is at your discretion. We're talking about it now, even though it's not quite the holiday season, because it actually takes some time to reserve the tree and get everything in order for the event to happen towards the end of November. Council can provide direction to place this on a business meeting to identify and appropriate resources for the holiday tree if you'd like to take the lead role in this, or council can provide direction to not take ownership of this event and assist in any willing community partners that may want to step up to help with the tree event, as we would with any other community event. And with that, Mayor, I turn it over to you for further discussion.
Thanks, council. Do you have any questions? Valerie.
I have a simple one. I'm assuming that all of the bulbs and all the stuff that goes along with the tree we have and actually belongs to the city, correct?
Yeah, that's sort of that. All those the decorations and stuff pretty much transition over with the city, and so we do have some ownership of some of that. We've borrowed the toy soldiers from the Bear Hotel and in help dressing up that 5th and G area.
Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Can you speak a little bit more to how much effort so far has been put into reaching out to community partners on this?
Well, we had reached out to community partners in the past. We had a good group of individuals come to the table, and they did take on things like the fairgrounds taking on Back to the 50s, and in association with the Rogue Valley Classic Cruisers. and other individuals stepping up to take on some of the other events that was once held by the city. No one stepped up to take on Art Along the Road, which is something that council did discuss and say that they wanted to take some action on, and this event also. There has been, and like I mentioned before, there is some interest that if this event is to happen, it may be included with some community interest in having a Christmas parade and or having the lighting be more of a ceremonial thing like it used to be. Last year, we basically plugged the lights in, turned it on, and had it there.
Who have you received interest from for accompanying events such as a parade?
What's that?
Who have you received interest from for an accompanying event such as a parade? You mentioned someone might be interested in tacking on a parade. I'm just wondering who that is.
Yeah, there's an individual in the community that stepped up and did a Christmas cruise last year because we didn't have a Christmas parade, and they're interested in potentially doing something like that or in building on this also.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Joel?
You know, one huge Christmas tree is a big expense. I don't know how tall the tree was. It was what, 60 feet tall?
No, I think it was
40?
closer to 40.
40?
Yeah,
Which requires special equipment, which costs money.
yeah.
We got a lot of trees in Josephine County. A lot of nice Christmas trees. And we can get as many as we want, right? And at a fairly inexpensive price, but they're not that tall. And so, like a 20-foot tree or 4 20-foot trees would be really easy. And I could drum up support personally to have people help me, and we can get that done. But I can't get a 60-foot tree without a lot of expense and more expensive equipment. And so, like 4 30-foot trees are as tall as I can get safely and not cost a lot of money, but still have a sense of community. I don't know if we'd be interested in something like that or not. The other thing is, if we do it, there'd have to be some community group that would be interested in assembling it and coordinating with the other members. But I do have a group that would be interested in providing the trees, probably at very little to no expense.
Valerie?
I want to say too, when we did have the forum and we had the discussion, and I was going to talk with Josie this morning, but she's ill right now. They showed an interest in, the chamber showed an interest in the Christmas parade and that sort of thing. So I do
Yeah.
remember that conversation they had, and that was something that they talked about at the time. So I don't know whether maybe we, like Joel said, kind of need to go out and send some feelers out and see if indeed we can get some support in some way. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, Counselor's correct, and I've talked with Josie a little bit too, and there was interest in the parade, maybe not interest, so it's not, I'm not quite sure, we need to confirm that, but no one has expressed interest in actually the acquisition and the raising of the tree.
Vanessa, then Rob?
Is there a specific committee that the committee expense fund would come from, or is that just a general committee expense fund?
Yeah, as council may recall, you had $10,000 in committee expenses in your fund. That's in general dollars for you to be able to grant to specific advisory committees or those type of activities if they come up with a special project. And so COPA recently provided a request, and $5,000 of that $10,000 went to COPA for Art Along the Road. So there's $5,000 remaining.
Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this a couple times before, that and it kind of possibly fits in with what Joel was just saying, but Many, or at least several of the immediate abutting businesses do not like the tree in its current location. When there was a first decision made, when the council made a decision to try the tree there, literally the night that decision was made, the council was told that bus loads would be coming over from Medford for the tree lighting and so forth, and it never panned out that way. The very first year, there were thousands of people there, there's no doubt, and every year it actually has diminished, interest has diminished. One of the businesses has spoken to me many times about how essentially putting that tree there completely kills their business for 5 to 6 weeks. Because some years it's actually 6 weeks that street is closed. But it absolutely devastates their business. Don from Don's Bike told me that initially when he first was kind of excited about it, he was kind of sold on the idea that having a tree there would be great for his business, and he said that never panned out either. I know that another one of the abutting businesses also looks at it as essentially just nonstop bathroom requests and not any increase in business. So years ago, I'm sure all of you can remember that the tree used to be near the railroad tracks in the parking lot just north of the Dutch Brothers stand. And it was a smaller tree, which gets to Joel's point. It was a tree that was probably 15 to 18 feet. It had a base that was built, and that base is probably still around, but it didn't have to go into the ground. It was small enough. I know that Travis Boersma feels that that's a better location, and I know that since he owns that property, that would be critical in the discussion. And my feeling on it is that having the tree visible from 6th Street means 25,000 cars a day can see it. Having it in its current location means a much, much smaller viewership. You can't see it at all really from the east or the west. From the north you can, but there's the G Street Plaza. So I'm actually of the opinion that the tree shouldn't be in the middle of the street on 5th Street. Every year it aggravates drivers for sure who are on H or further south who then try to go up. Last year there actually was no sign that said detour. So it's really, it's questionable to even keep it in that location, in my opinion, and I think a much better location is where it's visible on, from G Street where, again, 25,000 cars a day go by. So, and a smaller tree is what was done there. I suppose if that was going to be a permanent location, you could do a base, 4 feet into the ground like the one is on 5th Street. But then again, that's with a $4,500 tree rather than a free tree. So I'm actually of the opinion that we should have the tree somewhere where it can be seen from 6th Street, where it used to be just south of the railroad tracks. Santa used to come in on the train, and it was actually quite a show, and that's the way it was done every year. And that can be coordinated with a parade as well, Santa coming in on the train. So I'd actually be of the opinion that it should be on somewhere where you can see it on 6th. We can use a smaller tree that would probably be free, and the immediate abutting neighbors would be much happier.
Are there any other questions? All right. I guess we'll open it up for discussion. Aaron's wanting some direction on whether or not to pursue a large tree. Rick and then Valerie.
I like the tradition that we've established with the larger tree. Whenever I go by it to see it, there are other people there taking pictures next to it. I think it's very impressive. I guess I'm not against input from additional people downtown to really know what they feel the attraction or impact it has upon them, but I like the idea of, I would say, the oversized tree, and I would be supportive of that. Thank you.
Valerie.
Yeah, I just kind of like to tie it in with the downtown merchants and have them have that discussion. I don't know, I mean, normally I'd say, well, can we pull some sort of a committee or whatever, so I don't know who downtown, I know some of the downtown members are part of the chamber. I just think that they should be brought in the conversation. I don't want to make that decision for them. I'd like to know what their thoughts are and get on it right away, so that if they do decide, then we move forward with that. But I would like to get some input from downtown people.
Brian?
So, we're in like Tree Town, USA. I figure with just a little bit of effort, it seems like we could find a community partner that would help us get a really impressive tree. Whether they donate it or pay for it. I know this is a very pro-Christmas community, so I feel like that there are groups out there, whether they're churches or Evergreen Bank or whoever, that would be really excited to partner with the city on this. Maybe not to pay for the entire cost, but to be a partner in the whole holiday event.
Yeah.
So I personally would like to maybe see a little bit more reaching out in that regard if possible. And I'm also open to either location, as Rob said. He had a good rationale for the 6th Street location, so I'm open to that as well.
Vanessa?
I'll second all of that, what Councilor DeLaGrange just said. I will second what Councilor DeLaGrange had said. Repeating that just for anyone who may not have heard me.
Rob?
Yeah. The first year, the tree was free. It was donated by the person that they ended up buying the tree from after that. I know the first year it was free, and after that it did, at least in the past, it was tough to find people to come up with the purchase price for it. Now there are, or there have been some fairly significant sponsors, Evergreen Bank, KJO, they've sponsored some of the other incidentals, but nobody had stepped up in prior years for the big chunk of money for the tree and the lift and so forth. Again, that was free the first year, but then that, for whatever reason, didn't continue.
Valerie?
I guess my question to Aaron is, when would we need to have the tree? When do we need to know what we're going to do?
So we would, the tree handler, if we were to get a big tree and do what we've done in the past couple of years, we would need to know sooner than later, probably within the next 2 weeks, in order for them to make sure that they have the tree identified and or we're on the list to get one. If it's something different, then, or something like Councilor Pell was talking about, then it seems like we've got more flexibility with time. If that was the route council wanted to go, I'm sure we'd be able to find a partnership with the property owner along 6th Street to maybe put a smaller tree there. That could be an option also, or multiple trees, or whatever council wanted to do with that. So if we're to do the big tree, we need to know relatively soon, so they can start looking at where that tree is going to come from and have us on the list of being able to distribute one.
It sounds like we haven't spoken to the property owner there of the plaza to see whether that is actually a possibility.
On the smaller tree, I have not spoken to the property owner, but if that's a direction council wants to go, I'd be more than happy to reach out to that property owner and see about the placement of the Christmas tree along 6th Street. That would be something we could do.
Brian?
I think that would be a good piece of information to have as far as the decision goes. And if in the next 2 weeks any more outreach can be done to see if we can find any community partners like Evergreen Bank or KJO or Edgewater or River Valley or whoever, I feel like someone out there would be excited to partner with the city on this. And that would allow us to make an easy decision to get the big tree. And then if we can't find a community partner, then maybe, we cross that road when we come to it.
Rob?
And getting back to Valerie's point, I would volunteer with another counselor if you'd like to go door to door on G and or 5th or whatever to speak with business owners and get their feeling about various locations. So if someone wants to do that, or any other two counselors, but I would be one of two that would volunteer to do it, and could also do that within the next 2 weeks as well.
We can also, we have an email system where we've got about 90 of the downtown merchants. We can always send an email out with a quick response request also, if that's information council's wanting also.
I would appreciate that. And I would agree to go with Rob too, if that was what we wanted to do.
All right, I think we're all kind of on the same page here. We need to know whether the 6th Street location is even a possibility, and also talk with merchants about whether they have a preference.
Okay.
All right, good enough for today. Welcome Center funding. We're going to move on with our downtown theme today, and we have 2 different topics having to do with the Welcome Center. And so first up is discussing the operation of the Downtown Welcome Center. Looks like Adam Schultz, our finance director, is going to be presenting.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As stated, I've got some options for us on funding Welcome Center operations. This is a continuation of a prior discussion. So just to start with some background on that, in early 2021, Council identified the Downtown Welcome Center as a level of service that could either be eliminated or could be funded by an alternate source of funding besides discretionary dollars. It was estimated that this could be a savings of approximately $65,000. Current staffing levels at the Welcome Center are 36 hours per week with an annual cost of approximately $41,600. And there are some additional costs such as supplies and utilities. To summarize the options that we've presented in the past, there are some short-term and long-term options. In the short term, discretionary funds being using the general program operations, which now has $40,000 available after $10,000 was also used for that Art Along the Road project that Aaron had mentioned previously, or to continue to pay for that out of the Downtown Development Division. These are both using the same source of funds, so there's a little difference between those two of the outcome of using those discretionary dollars. There's also using tourism promotion funds. We have approximately $95,000 of unspent funds in the tourism division from FY21. However, those dollars are slated to be transferred to LB 6314, which is the Downtown Restrooms and Welcome Center project. So those could be used for this, but they're currently dedicated at the moment. The long-term option that's really been discussed has to do with that finding an alternate funding source, and that would be to use funds from tourism promotion, specifically using the 2% savings from when the originally considered 30% of net lodging tax revenues going to the DMO. That was reduced down to 28. So right now, that 2% is estimated to be about $42,400. So those are the options that have been presented so far, but we also recently had a conversation about bringing recreation in-house with a recreation coordinator and a part-time office assistant. Now that part-time office assistant had an estimated cost of $23,000 to $29,000. So a potential idea being that right now, which is the first column you see there on the left, is what's the cost of continuing to fund downtown Welcome Center operations, and then to fund the recreation office with that part-time assistant at a separate location. So obviously those two items separately cost more than the two options that you see to the right, which is to potentially combine those two operations into the same location and hopefully realize some savings. So that middle column there, the option being to maintain that 36-hour temporary staffing downtown, and they would service both the Welcome Center and recreation booking. That personnel cost would remain the same, and the square footage charge is a charge that is paid to facilities maintenance to maintain the facility, doing repairs, and it also covers some utilities of the office. And the second column, where it says space not used as an office, just represents that instead of converting or upgrading a space for recreation to live, we wouldn't have to pay the additional cost of another employee or the extra facilities maintenance charge on that. Another option, which would be on the more expensive end but still realize some savings, would be we could have a full-time 40-hour employee that's actually an employee of the city, not a temporary staff. Obviously, with the additional benefits that come with a full-time employee, that would be a bit more expensive, but we could still save as much as $22,736. So that middle option, that 64, is about the amount of savings we'd have combining the two offices and keeping the temporary staff. And then the option on the far right is if we had a full-time employee instead of temporary staff. I did put a star on the square footage charge you'll see there, and that is because $23,000 of that $31,430 is actually already paid for by tourism. That was included as part of the presentation on what the tourism division pays for, and part of that cost that would need to be retained so that the city has enough money to pay its expenses, and then the other percentage going to the DMO. Some additional considerations on this as an option would be that $29,053, which you see in the second column on the left, that is what the cost would be based on the square footage charge, but it doesn't take into account the additional time strain that would put on facilities maintenance. They might not have enough time to also service another facility, or they might need more personnel to do that as well. A benefit of this plan is obviously that they could split the cost of a single location and an additional employee rather than duplicating those efforts in two different spaces. Because they would be doing two functions there at the same location, we'd have some fairly good data on how much of their efforts were spent on tourism and welcoming visitors and providing them with information versus doing recreation bookings and rentals. And with that data, that we can then make a good determination of, okay, well, the tourism promotion dollars could go to fund X amount. So that could end up paying for more of that personnel staff if they were doing a lot of tourism dollars. So I don't know what the exact outcome of that would be at this time, but we'd have better data to be able to make an informed decision on that. Another item of consideration would be that one temporary staff, in addition to the recreation coordinator, might not be enough. The volume might be more than the bandwidth of those staff. So if that were the case, then we'd also have the option to bring in a part-time 20-hour a week employee and still have some savings there of up to $40,000, because a part-time 20-hour employee is a pretty small additional expense that we could tack on to take that extra volume. And another item of note is I was informed that recreation services actually used to be performed at the Downtown Welcome Center. So I don't have any personal experience with that, but that's what I'm told. So I believe it has worked in the past. As far as cost implications go, including the items that we've presented in the past, is that we do have the short-term funds available, whether that's discretionary dollars. We have the budget for it, so that can be Downtown Welcome Center operations can be continued for the rest of the fiscal year. That's definitely a possibility. For long-term, the use of only the tourism support reduces flexibility of the tourism dollars and is subject to whether lodging tax revenues go up or higher risk of if it goes down, the tourism division would end up using discretionary dollars anyways if there weren't enough tourism dedicated funds. Or that final option that I've just presented for your consideration today is combining Recreation Welcome Center operations with the potential to save anywhere between $22,000 and $64,000, depending on how we choose to staff that. So overall, all your alternatives are to approve the use of the now available $40,000 of general discretionary funds from general program operations, to reallocate funds from LB 6314, which is the Downtown Welcomes Restrooms and Welcome Center project. We can reallocate funds from another general fund source. Any combination of that option is just going to use discretionary dollars. We could utilize the 2% savings from the reduction in the tourism contract with the DMO, or now potentially combine recreation and welcome center operations. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thanks, Adam. We've got some questions. Joel, then Rick.
Well, good staff work, Adam. So thank you. I mean, looking at options and thinking a little bit outside the box, that's what this council needs. That's what the citizens need and expect. So I honor you for that. The contract for rentals before with the private, what did that contract cost?
I believe you're referring to Rec Northwest, correct?
Yes.
It was about 174,000, I think.
So this would replace that $174,000 contract, correct?
Not the full 174,000 because there's the recreation coordinator. I didn't include them in this analysis because we would still need that recreation coordinator.
Okay,
this
so-
option is really just taking advantage of that additional staffing, and instead of having 2 additional staffing, we combine that into 1.
Into one. So then the 174,000 with minus that other staffing, how much is left over from what we paid the contractor? Does that make sense?
29. The city's cost of bringing recreation in-house, I believe, was less than the 174 anyways.
It was a
just
savings
from what I'm
between
remembering.
about $25,000 to $32,000 for taking the recreation in-house, and then this would be an additional savings above and beyond that if we combine rec services with.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking. So we've already saved 25,000 by bringing it in-house, and then we combined it using your excellent staff work with the Welcome Center and the tourism to save even more money and to continue the high level of service.
That's a good
So
summary.
why wouldn't I do that?
So I will say the caveat to this is I'm not a recreation coordinator expert. So I'd have to refer, this is very much a finance biased analysis. So service levels is certainly why we're bringing it to you, and if you guys are interested in us doing that.
I have a quick thing before we go to Rick. I'm not sure how, if we've saved $25,000 to $30,000 by bringing recreation in-house, wouldn't this plan be spending those savings on the additional help with recreation work rather than saving an additional $25,000 or $30,000?
Part of the consideration, or this plan, is assuming that we want to continue downtown operations. If we were to completely eliminate downtown Welcome Center operations, that would be a different analysis. I did not perform that. But with the idea of keeping both, I believe this is how we do it the most cost efficiently.
Well, and to answer the mayor's question, there was expense involved with bringing it in-house, but it wasn't the full expense of the contract. And so the expense from bringing it in-house with doing it with that employee was $26,000 or whatever cheaper than having the contract. So whether you combined it or not, you're going to save that $26,000 by hiring that in-house employee and not having the contract. So you got those 2 options there. And then where do you put that? Where do you put that employee? If you put them in a multifunctional basis at the visitor center that can accomplish more than one goal, as long as it provides the level of service, then you get an additional savings.
So is this personnel at the Welcome Center the actual recreation coordinator or a second position?
This is a second
This is-
position.
That's what I thought. Okay. Rick?
Thank you, Adam. On your first slide, you indicated alternative funding. And at one point, the Chamber of Commerce indicated they may have an interest in running the Welcome Center at this location. Have they indicated any further interest, or has there been any contact with them?
No, not since we last talked with them about that, and that they may be open to it. That would ultimately be a level of service discussion that council would need to make if they would like to have the chamber look into that. At this point, they have not said yes or no, but.
Well, I would be supportive if the council wanted to explore that. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I agree with Rick on that. I know that when, as I remember it anyway, when we reached out to the chamber before, they kind of were looking either for an RFP or some specifics. Now we have quite a few of those specifics, or at least the parameters of those specifics filled in for us as far as how many hours and how much we're possibly planning on spending, et cetera. So I would think that we definitely at this time would be prepared to actually discuss that potentially with the chamber, because we kind of have the structure here that they were looking for before they wanted to decide whether they wanted to do it.
Brian, then Valerie.
Yeah, I would like to continue this discussion after we hear from the chamber.
Valerie?
Yeah, I know that the chamber was waiting on an RFP, because basically that's what they said, is that they needed to have more information before they were willing to come to the table because they didn't know exactly what was expected. So I think this would be a good time to reach out to them and say, okay, this is what we're looking at before we make any big decisions. My question, going back to, obviously, the building where the Recreation Northwest has been functioning up on Gilbert Creek, correct? So are we just talking about shutting that down, or how does that? I'm assuming that that is part of this conversation, is that's how we're saving money too, is by, as opposed to having two buildings, we then have one building.
Yeah, that's accurate. The contract, or the agreement, maybe a better term, that the city has with Grants Pass School District number 7, for the lease of that property, includes all of Gilbert Creek Park. It doesn't really call out the building itself separate from the, from the tennis court and the dog park and the other things that are at Gilbert Creek. So in terms of a saving, of course, there's no, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but there's no cash involved here, really. It's a 10-year agreement that we just renewed with the school district last year. So there's some savings because, there's the power and a few other things for that office building there that would no longer be used, but it would be very, very minimal.
Okay, and I guess that was my question. So we have been paying the utilities and that as part of our contract with them, but.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Joel?
So Adam, could you go back to comparing the alternatives and the dollars? There we go, okay. I just need to look at that and understand it.
It sounds to me like one critical difference here between potentially doing an RFP with the chamber and going with this proposed route is recreation services and kind of dealing with those bookings in our parks. So that might be something above and beyond what we would ask the chamber to do if they were to run the Welcome Center. And it sounds like there's been 2 people so far in the past offering recreation programs, and we've been talking about hiring 1 recreation coordinator, so this would provide kind of some additional administrative help for that person. Rob?
Since we're, I guess, moved into the discussion phase, when I look at the information on this page, something else to consider is that it's kind of hard to quantify and it might be a little bit nuanced, but the exact, a really top person to run the Welcome Center is going to really kind of have we'll say a sales bias, or is going to be really pumped up about the downtown, pumped up about Grants Pass, and is going to do a good job selling it. And that may not be the same personality or the same skill set that someone who's going to be basically booking our parks and so forth. That could be completely different, and both of those people could be really good at their jobs, but may not be good, be completely different personalities or skills. So, on the one hand, I'd like to see somebody like probably the way the chamber would man it, would be a really good cheerleader for the downtown and for the city and for the area. And the other, so in other words, there's other things to consider, and again, those are not easy to quantify, especially from a finance perspective, but from who's going to do the job really better, we also may want to consider that as well.
Anybody else? Questions for Adam? All right, any further discussion, thoughts on this topic for the moment? Kurt?
Well, I've said multiple times that I'm doubtful of the real value of the Welcome Center. And so I guess I would say if the chamber thinks it's valuable, the chamber should get in and run it. But otherwise, we've talked about the Welcome Center is kind of, as Alton Brown would call it, a unitasker. But by combining the recreation services there, it becomes more of a multitasker and becomes more of a beneficial use of our money. So I'm in favor of combining the recreation services in the Welcome Center.
Valerie?
And I like that idea. I guess I'm not exactly sure I know that the recreation center had 3 people working down there. And I guess the person, you're saying that the recreation coordinator we hired is going to be located at the city, correct? I mean, so that the main coordinator is going to be located within the city. So basically, this is just the person who would be part-time down, no, I'm saying, I mean, I guess I'm just not completely clear about what the recreation person would be doing down at the Welcome Center.
So the coordinator would be taking on the majority of what the contract that we had with Rec Northwest. So there's a whole suite of things, and I think during Aaron's presentation a couple of weeks ago for the rec coordinator, which the council supported, we kind of outlined what that is. And certainly field scheduling, reservations for the shelters, many of those things can happen there, but there's also a lot of other activities, but any of those I think can be accomplished, at the center. So it would not just be the assistant. I think at this point, the thinking is that it would be both. The rec coordinator and the part-time assistant. It's a pretty good sized office, in that half of the Welcome Center. There's a small storage unit back there. I mean, I think it could certainly be accommodated for that, especially when the part-time office assistant when the office assistant is only part-time.
Okay. So you're saying that it is the coordinator would do the majority of and just the person that was doing the actual, so I guess, like I said, I just have a hard time envisioning, and I'm thinking about that one side at the Welcome Center, which brings us to the whole remodeling thing, which we're going into next. And in some ways, it kind of ties in with that in terms of how that space would be utilized. If there would be a separate area for the recreation coordinator and a separate area for the person running it.
So, yeah, that's why it's good to have this conversation now. The idea of why we brought this forward was an opportunity for us to maybe take our limited resources and still deliver two valuable services to the community. And we believe that the recreational specialist, along with the part-time support staff, would be able to serve the downtown sector also, similar to what it is now, allowing and keeping the visitor center open, being an ambassador to the community, and doing so with a cost savings associated with keeping those programs separate. If you keep those programs separate, you'll have the standard cost of rec services, which we've identified and allocated. We're trying to come up with a cost to do the downtown services, and we saw this as an opportunity to fold the two together and save money but still provide the services. So that's why we brought this forward to you.
And I totally get it, and I totally respect that and understand why this came about, and I'm really excited about the idea, but I'm just trying to visualize in my head. So you're saying there would be two people down there?
There would be two people. There'd be a full-time, and then there'd be a part-time, 20 hours a week, that depending on, like Adam was saying earlier, depending on the level of service when it comes to time spent travel and tourism, maybe it needs to be two 20-hour-a-week people. Maybe it needs to be a 30-hour-a-week person, whatever that is. Ultimately, once we get the data, we'll be able to track that more. But it would be those two individuals serving the purpose. That downtown welcome center would be where people come to get things about our community and about our parks and about reservations it would serve a dual purpose and a dual role, and by doing so, we're able to leverage other general fund resources with other travel and tourism lodging tax resources to deliver a service at a cheaper cost.
Okay.
I'm not sure we're getting much more clarity here, because I think we're talking about two full-time positions, really. One is entirely the recreation coordinator, and one is half rec, half tourism, but operating the Welcome Center 40 hours a week, is that, or 36, depending on the...
So right now, we've got a great individual, Kate, that's down there right now that operates the Welcome Center and is what our downtown services really is, which is the operation of the Welcome Center, which is having those hours available, open to the public. This provides us with that at a cheaper cost than providing two services together. The downtown program, as it states, provides resources to keep that door open and have an individual there acting as an ambassador for people walking in the door. That same thing would exist if we place rec services there. We'd be able to utilize, by leveraging dollars that are going to rec services, to also serve a dual purpose to keep the Welcome Center open and to be that ambassador for the downtown area also.
But that would be a separate person than Kate.
No, not at the moment. There would be,
Okay.
we're talking about.
So basically you're wrapping the downtown services person to do to be the part-time person as well, to do the bookings, is what you're saying. So there's one person down there.
That's correct. The recreation coordinator would be recreation focused, and the part-time individual that would be focused on the visitor center, those would be the two individuals there, and they would essentially serve as each other's backups for if one person is busy, the other person can do recreation bookings, or if the visitor center personnel was busy, then the recreation coordinator could answer some of those questions. So it's two services that get to back each other up at the same location, but they would have kind of their individual areas of focus.
And I'm just clarifying. And I'm just getting clarity, because like I said, so you're saying that really the recreation coordinator is a 1.5 person? No, so it is just so, because when I asked about the recreation coordinator, you said that would be at the city. So I assumed that that recreation coordinator would be working out of the city here. And you're saying, no, they would be down that city.
Yes,
which is
they'd be
Welcome
there.
Center.
That would be their office.
Okay, that's where I was confused.
Yeah, we would place
Okay.
them in that service delivery at the 6 and G location.
So if that's the case, then I question where the chamber comes in. So, yeah. So that's why.
What
yes.
that would do is it would provide a direct link between you as a council and the city as an organization being at a very integral part of the downtown 6 and G. You would have a direct connection, as that's your Welcome Center. That's your rec and Welcome Center location. And so that would be another, it's not a financial benefit, but there is a potential benefit council may want to consider about it being the city's Welcome Center downtown with a direct line of sight with the business community also.
So this goes to Adam. So do we get is it 10% or whatever of the money that comes and is designated to the lodging tax goes to downtown services? Correct?
Of all of the lodging taxes that we received, downtown development receives 5.83%, which is on this far right column.
I don't see that. I see 10% on the left column, but bring me over. That's after, oh, there it is. Okay, 5.83, which is about 6%. Okay, so that amount of money, which is the 123,701, is money that is designated for downtown development. What does downtown development, what costs come under that? Is that when we're talking about the baskets, the flower baskets? I mean, I'm just trying to say what does that pay for?
So here's a slide of downtown development specifically. Salary, benefits, supplies, services, utilities, and direct charges. The two largest numbers there are salary, which I've got a little personnel chart down at the bottom. That covers 1 FTE for community service officers. This year, the park superintendent and the park service worker were removed for FY22. The facilities maintenance supervisor has 15% of their time being charged to downtown development, and then a service specialist and worker totaling 1.45 FTE is also charged to downtown development. The other large number being services, and then over to the top right, I have a breakdown of what those services were for 2021. Welcome center staffing, I just rounded to 43,000. Trash and litter removal is that $31,800. Landscaping, street sweeping, a bit of the bucket truck, which is for flower baskets, and several small miscellaneous charges totaling about $7,000. And then in FY21, the portable toilets cost us $20,000. Fortunately, we're getting that reimbursed through COVID. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. That does.
Rick?
I like the concept we're exploring here because I feel we're stretching the dollars for our value, which I really appreciate. At one point, though, I think we had some statistics, how many visitors came in the Welcome Center and the number of hours that they were open. And at that time, if I remember, and these are old statistics, I think it was about 1 person per hour. So therefore, I would really like the idea of the recreation person being located at that location. But if you only have 1 person an hour, it seems like they could also encompass that is the Welcome Center aspect, without having to hire a second person. Thank you.
Vanessa, then Brian.
Yeah, a couple questions. Can we please have a copy of that downtown development slide? I think that would be really helpful reminder for this conversation. And as well, I do know that the council recently approved the job classification for Recreation Northwest. So would we have to take any further action if these two were kind of fused together as backups, if we did move forward with that decision? For the Recreation Northwest coordinator to kind of come in and assist with the visitor center individual if they needed it, is that something we would have to add to that job classification? I don't think that's something that's already in there at this time.
I'd have to take a look at that. I don't think that it would be any major modification to that job description. The primary function of that individual is recreation services. They're housed there. They're ambassador for the parks. They can be ambassador for those people walking in. But then also we've got the other individual, which would be taking the lead more on the downtown welcome center aspect of it also. So I didn't see any major need to change the job description as it's written, because the individual from a responsibility perspective still is supervising 1 FTE and still has very similar responsibilities. So it wouldn't change the salary schedule or anything that it's in.
Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, so are we talking about having Kate or her equivalent and the recreation coordinator and them having their own kind of desk space, and then also and then continuing to keep the police substation in there also?
Yeah, that'd be correct.
Okay.
We would still be able to have the other essentials, which are the 3-legged stool. At one time, council defined the 3-legged stool as keeping the welcome center open, keeping restrooms open, and having a police substation. And we would see that 3-legged stool still existing under this scenario.
Okay, that little building is getting pretty crowded. If it's serving all those functions, I'm all for efficiency. I'm all for streamlining. I think as we go into our next discussion about the facility itself, it's going to be made evident that it is not laid out in an optimal way. And some of the things that we could do there would make it more enticing for people to go into, and it would get more activity from, just from people in general. So before having that conversation, I'm pretty hesitant to try to cram another program and another person in there when honestly, I think that whole front area should be opened up to serve a really premium welcome center type purpose. And I would also maybe even bring up questioning the three-legged stool of having the police substation there now that we have the new police station, 4 blocks up the road here. And I know that we have really good coverage downtown. I would maybe question if that needs to stay as a functional substation or not. So those are my thoughts.
All right, well, early on in this discussion, we had several people indicate an interest in getting an RFP with chamber interest, but in light of this discussion about recreation services, are you still interested in that? Brian?
I'm still interested in seeing where that could go, because that in its own way could streamline it and save us money, so we don't have to put another program in there that may or may not fit best there. So I would be in favor of getting that information.
Joel?
Well, there's a part of me that says the multifunctional has a lot of strengths. And the downtown and the parks. And that it wouldn't subtract from either one, but maybe add to both the rentals and the downtown and overnight stays and one-stop shopping for the public. And by the way, we would have backups. I think it's great that we look for those type of opportunities because it's been my experience they work out really well. And they don't subtract from each other, they add to each other. And downtown business gets even better and our rentals are even more occupied. So there's a part of me that says I'm ready to do it. But I do think getting some, I'm not sure a request for bids from Chamber, but coordination with Chamber to see what they're thinking and what their feedback is. They're a very valuable part of our community. Before we move forward, I think would be good. Otherwise, I'm ready to remove this uncertainty and to release the energy once we make a decision and move forward.
All right, well, I guess if nobody else is going to speak up, I mean, you did earlier express an interest in further discussions with the chamber, so I'm seeing a couple nods in support of that. We still need to talk to the chamber, I guess, and see if they're interested in having any part of this.
I can certainly approach the chamber and provide them with any information they need in order to give us with an idea of how much it would cost for them to service that downtown center with the current service levels.
I was just going to say, I think they're looking for specifics, though. It's my understanding that they want to know really what is it that the city wants them to do there.
Just to keep it the same, I would just state the same service levels that we're doing right now. So it's a maintenance of hours associated with the Welcome Center being open. That's primarily what we're looking at from that standpoint. The flower baskets and other things like that we're doing, but really we're talking about the necessary percentage of FTE associated with keeping the doors open at the Welcome Center.
Brian?
I would maybe propose in talking to the chamber, because right now it's only staffed 36 hours a week, and that's for 7 days a week. I would maybe propose to them, at least a 40-hour, see how much it might cost for a 40-hour or even 50-hour. I mean, when it's 7 days a week, you need a little bit different coverage than 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, like a normal position. So since it's a tourist-related position, it's a little bit more weekend heavy. The hours might shift a little bit. So I would be in favor of at least looking to get 40-hour coverage, if not more.
Rick?
before I would be comfortable with the 40 hours, I would want to see what the visitor load is, visitation to the center. Because if the activity's not there, I don't feel like we should be funding a person sitting there just seeing one person an hour come in, where, as I mentioned before, if the recreation person could handle that additional service, I think that would be an advantage.
Not giving a very good
Do you
direction,
need
are we?
more?
Currently, right now, what I'm looking at, just for clarity on moving forward, is we will be reaching out to the chamber and seeing if they can provide us with a monetary value associated with service levels of this 6 and G Welcome Center location. And we will provide that to you in the near future at a future workshop to where you can make further decisions or discussions on level of service.
Sounds good. I think as part of that, we may also need additional clarity on what the recreation program really needs, because it sounds like you need more than one FTE.
The rec program was approved at 1.2 FTE. We have a budget for one full-time and one actually 1.5 FTE and 20 hours a week. So that's what that's what we're moving forward with from a rec perspective.
Okay. All right, moving on to Welcome Center remodel and facade update.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this presentation does deal strictly with the facade update. I did not come prepared to talk about an interior remodel, and I apologize seeing where this conversation was going. I am trying to get access to a floor plan so that if you did want to have a very brief discussion about that at the end, I can at least bring up the floor plan currently for you. There is quite a bit of office space existing in that building in addition to the front entry, so there is a fair amount of room there to be utilized. So what we have is a brief outline of the work that's previously been accomplished on the facade update. The relationship to your council goals is to maintain, operate, and expand the infrastructure to meet the community's needs. And it's under Objective 1, Action 4, which is Welcome Center facade improvements, which was a 3-star item in goal setting. So this goal has been around for quite a while, and it's been kind of on again, off again, on again, and now it's on again. But it was originally incorporated into the strategic plan in 2016, and it was a 2-star item at that time, but then was put on hold due to potential development of the Caveman Plaza. We didn't want to invest a lot of money when we didn't know what the plan for the overall property was. At that time, however, potential concepts were created that fit the look of the central business district and potentially comply with historic guidelines. And then per the strategic plan updates, the project was placed on hold when Dutch Brothers made an offer to purchase the property. And so what changed then is that goal then became find a new place for the visitors center, as some of you who were on council at that time recall. Then the project was re-upgraded to a 3-star item and expanded to include restrooms. And actions in 2017 did include researching alternate locations, either in properties, looking for partnerships, and it did also include a potential partnership with the Dutch Brothers development. Staff continued to work with Dutch Brothers until 2018 when the project was again placed on hold as the Dutch Brothers Corporation reevaluated their plans. So improvements that have been made in 2019, we made improvements to the HVAC system. Those could no longer wait. We also redid the roof as that was becoming a must-do situation. The exterior modification and signage improvements were set to begin in spring of 2020. However, departmental changes due to the PAVE report and COVID-19 kind of put all of that on hold again. At this time, however, we are ready to move forward with this project, and we are now looking for direction to get this back on track. So quite a while back, Assistant City Manager Dave Reeves, working with former Facilities Management Supervisor Mike Byrne, did work with an architect to create a series of sketches to assist council with making some facade improvements. In July 8th of 21, these were submitted to the Historic Sites and Buildings Commission, Historic Buildings and Sites Commission, to solicit their initial feedback and ensure that the 8 concepts did conform with historic guidelines for the downtown district. It was not to seek approval for any design, that's very important, nor did we ask for any type of approval, just to say, hey, do you have a preference? Do these meet with the historic guidelines, or are there materials that we're showing that would not be congruent with the downtown district? From that, I'm going to jump way to the bottom of the slide there. The HBSC did prefer alternative 4, although there are 7 that we're going to look at, as well as they suggested one alternative that was not on there, which was to restore the look of the Benjamin Franklin Bank, which was more of an all-white colonial style building. So with that, I want to kind of walk through those, and I'm going to go kind of slow, but you do have them in your brochure or in the printout there. All of these do meet with historic guidelines. Some of them more than others. Some may take a little bit of work to get through the HBSC. This was their preference. The Historic Buildings and Site Commission did suggest that this one would be the most fitting with the downtown. Or they suggested possibly this as an alternative, which was what the building used to look like back in the 1980s when it was constructed.
That's amazing. I know, isn't that funny? Whoa.
So at this time, the facade remodel, it is really unknown what it would cost. We don't have a design to be able to price that out. Funds are budgeted within Project LB 6314, Downtown Restroom and Welcome Center Building. Council has already allocated $375,000 to purchase restrooms. Installation costs are estimated to be about $50,000 for each of those restrooms, leaving approximately $400,000 available for any facade and interior remodeling that may be needed. So at this point, what I am looking for, this is totally at your discretion, but we're looking for direction. If we are going to move forward with an exterior remodel, Public Works would recommend that we bring on an architect to do the design. And get that into a bid-ready state so that we could put that out on the market to receive quotes from builders. Also, if we do want to look at the interior, we would have to then work with an architect to redo the footprint of the inside of the building to change that up as well. And I would take any questions.
Questions for Jason? Rick?
Thank you, Jason. So we've had an architect provide some drawings and so forth. Do we have a cost estimate what the architect would be for designing the interior as well as the exterior?
We don't. And those were all done, I want to say in 2016 by Dave Reeves and Mike Byrne. We could not find any data on who the architect actually was. I'd have to dig back through the records. It's just because the project has been handed from so many hands, there's just been a little bit that's been lost. I did not go back out to seek engineers' estimates at this time.
Other questions? Joel?
So when you went and took it to the Historic Committee, do you remember, was it unanimous for alternative 4?
I'm embarrassed to say this, I missed the meeting.
Missed the meeting. Brad, do you remember?
It was unanimous.
It was unanimous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I knew the answer, but I had to ask a question.
Rob?
So how much does any possible interior designs play into the exterior architecture?
It shouldn't have much to do with it. I don't see, they're pretty separate. The interior is already pretty modular. We could easily move some walls around on the interior. I say easily, but it'd be, reasonably expensive. Ideally, you would want to do all of them at the same time. If we were going to do an interior remodel, there might be some economy of scale of mobilizing one contractor instead of 2.
Well, when I see, like on the, I guess the south side, when I see where the windows are laid out and so forth, or for that matter, I know that we've spoken in the past about possibly redesigning the bathrooms. which could affect, where doors are and things of that nature. I'm not trying to, muddy the works, so to speak, but it would seem as though if we were looking at the two at the same time, and possibly looking at the interior first might even be the smartest move, as far as being able to efficiently ask for an architect's rendering of what the outside is going to end up like.
Yeah, fair enough. I will say this project has always been kind of considered an exterior remodel. The interior remodel in the bathroom just recently came up, and that's why we didn't really come prepared for that discussion.
It was considered exterior initially, but we've had the bathroom discussion, and I know that after that discussion, I went back in there and did check out the bathrooms, and with an escort, I checked out the women's bathroom also, and saw the whole deal there. So it does seem as though there's a lot of bathroom we'll say resources in there that aren't being used as efficiently as they could be. The other thing too is I know that when this was initially looked at as just an exterior project, that was before our pave selection process, and if I remember correctly, and I can't tell you the details, Valerie might remember or someone else might remember, but there was a firm, the pave firm that was not hired. I think they were from Portland. They had some very specific ideas as to what needed or how the interior could be improved. They had at least 3 or 4 different ideas on how to improve the interior, and I get better flow and so forth. And to look at that, because we've already essentially, I think that was free, but we already have those ideas without having to pay for anybody to look at those. But I would very much want to have an idea of what we're trying to do on the inside before we would make any commitment on hiring an architect to design the outside, because like I say, windows, doors, things like that could be changed dramatically depending on what we feel we need on the inside.
Okay. Valerie?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about when you're talking about through the PAVE committee, unless there was something earlier. But one of the things they did say in the PAVE was that since we had 2 visitor centers, that we needed to really take a look at the second visitor center and see to look at it through different lens, because it didn't make any sense to have 2 of the same. Now, of course, we are looking at it a different lens, because now we're looking at the recreation, and so that is a different lens as well. So I get it. I think, like you said, this is a bigger discussion than just, okay, what kind of siding should we slap around on the outside? Because there has been the discussion about, do we need to, are we putting the Portland loo there? If we're putting the Portland loo there, do we still need to keep the bathrooms back there? So there have been other discussions. So I would kind of tend to say I don't want to just talk about the exterior without really talking about what is the purpose of the interior and how are we going to use that building. And my question is, how much is it used as a substation police-wise? I mean, is it busy? Like someone mentioned, we've got the public safety building right down the street. Is it just a stop-off place for the CSOs? I'm not sure how it's used.
It's not that busy at all. I mean, the idea is we could use it for the parking specialist that's coming forward, so he or she downtown quite often. The CSOs and the cadets. The CSOs do use it. To be fair, it's not used that often.
Okay, thank you. So it just kind of seems like there's a lot of things in play that I would support looking at the inside of it before we make any decisions on the outside.
Sounds, Chief, like you don't feel it a critical office space for your department. You could take it or leave it?
I would rather take it, as much property as I can get. You never give up the ground. But I could probably let it go, and it wouldn't hurt the team to walk a few extra blocks.
Take his strategy into consideration if we ever play board games or something. But Joel?
My red personality's coming out, so you have to bear with me. This is just my opinion. It's not a question. It's a statement. Doing the facade is a statement for all of downtown, for people that come by, the 25,000 people, that it's historic. This is Grants Pass. This is richness. This is a community you want to come to. This is economic development, this is vitality. And so I'm all for moving ahead. And I realize that we could design the inside somewhat differently. There's other things, we could have the police in some other different location, that's fine. We don't have to decide everything today, but in terms of what Grants Pass is about and the statement for the future and the faith in the future, I think we need this excitement in town. We need this statement. And so I'd like to move ahead with it. And I would choose number 4 because I would trust the judgment of the people on the Historic Committee.
Brian?
So I mostly agree with Joel. I think that everyone on the dais agrees that that building needs work.
Yes.
On the outside and probably on the inside. But to Rob's point, if we do the outside first and then we decide to make big changes on the inside, then we have to redo part of the outside again, then that's not efficient. So, looking at part of the building, not the entire building, doesn't sound like the wisest way forward. It sounds like we should maybe get an architect that can look at the whole thing, help us figure out exactly what needs to happen on the inside and the outside, before we go charging ahead with doing something that we may need to change again later.
Rob?
Yeah, I totally agree, Brian. And I know that since we've had so many problems with the bathrooms in there, we are definitely not getting our full value out of those basically six stalls, 3 men's, 3 women's. And it'd be great if we could incorporate a new design on the inside, and that could involve different exits, to the different egress to the bathrooms. I'm not sure, but it'd be great if we could get way more value out of those 6 stalls because it's such a great location for bathrooms. Also, I know, and Valerie, what I was speaking about was when in the PAVE process, before we hired the final PAVE auditor, there was another firm that was considered, I think they were from Portland. They came down and they gave a bunch of free ideas as to what the inside changes could be done. They also had some specific ideas on signage for the exterior, different signage ideas. They were very critical of the lack or poor signage that was there now. And so that's what I was referring to. It wasn't the firm that we hired, it was a different firm that kind of gave us a free sample, so to speak. But again, I'm not sure who the person is, and probably an architect, but how do we get maximum value out of those 2 large bathrooms that are in there, the 6 stalls that are in there, because we're not getting maximum value out of them now. And that to me would be one of the primary things I'd like to see in a redesign, how to maximize that bathroom space. And of course, make it look good and inviting and everything else, as Joel was saying. And, but how to maximize that bathroom space would really be worth considering.
Vanessa, then Brian.
Yeah, Councillor De La Grange and I were down there quite a while ago and brainstorming potential uses and potential upgrades to the building. And we were there maybe 30 minutes and I counted 6 people that attempted to go to the back doors to use the restroom. So it is a well-known area for bathrooms. I think it really would serve us to look kind of at this project from the middle out rather than from the outside in. And so I think that it would serve us better if we looked at this holistically. And to kind of give some feedback on the facade recommendations, I would always shy away from number 1 and number 2. I do believe that we have a responsibility to make this building an example of wildfire hazard mitigation development, and so I think 1 and 2 would kind of go against that model.
Brian?
Jason, could you pull up number 4 on the slides? So this is the one HBSC recommended. I personally don't have any problem with this design. I think it's fine. I think it is an improvement to what we have currently down there from a facade perspective. However, I think this is a good time for me to put a little plug in for one of the recommendations that I would like to see is I would like to see the entire front of that building floor-to-ceiling windows. So cars going by, everyone walking by can very easily see inside this building, and it's more inviting, and it wants, you know, it draws people in. Those windows that are there now, you know, they may look big, but you can't really see in the building. The way it's structured and with the glare and everything, you know, you can't really see in there. So having that entire front, floor-to-ceiling, plexiglass or windows or however they do it, would really be a huge statement for the visitor center. It would be striking. I think it would bring a lot more people in. And then another idea would be to put a full kind of covered patio across the entire front. You know, that's, you know, it would be a shallow patio, but you could have space for a few tables out there for people to sit at. You could have a space on the corner of the property there for a musician to set up on First Fridays. So just kind of trying to maximize the usefulness of the space. Thanks.
So image number 6 has more of a covered patio. Is that something in line with what you're thinking?
Something like that, but not like that.
Okay. We will read his mind next time. I like the sign on number 8. It's a minor detail, but having that little visitor center thing up on top of the porch makes it pretty clear to people along the street what you're looking at. All right, well, we do not have to make any decisions on this today, so I think everybody just needs to mull it over. It sounds like we have some interest in making some decisions about how we're going to use the interior of the building before we get too far down the road and talking about the exterior of the building. Is there anything that you want staff to do in the meantime here? Brian?
Well, I'm just curious if we know how much it would cost us to get a consultant just to not necessarily draw up a design, but maybe to help us get a better idea of what we could do, what the cost might be, just to kind of, you know, something that can help us along a little bit here, because I think that we're going to need that sooner or later.
I think, council, you can do whatever you want. The sky's the limit as long as you've got the money. So I think the key moving forward for staff to be able to get you something so you can make an informed decision would be to really define the purpose of the building. If the purpose of the building is, say, visitor center, rec center, public restrooms, downtown substation, whatever your purpose of the building is, then we could purposefully design if like Councilor Zay said, from the inside out and accomplish all the goals. I think that'd be the key. If you had a list of 3 to 7 purposes, we can get something more for you at the next workshop.
I'm not sure, are we willing to make that decision today before we've figured out, you know, what the chamber's doing and what we're doing with rec services? But Valerie?
Well, I was just going to kind of add on a little bit to what Brian said, because one of the things that did come through the PAVE audit was the fact that a lot of places have it kind of open like on the first Friday, to where there is a musician, where it's just, there's an outdoor seating area, you know, that kind of wraps itself in that. And that was one of the things that came through the PAVE audit, was just that, is to make it very inviting and not so closed boxy. And that's why even looking at that one that you talked about, it just having a little bit of the area in the front that's open is something that I think should be factored in.
Rob?
Yeah, I think, you know, since we look at the location of the building, smack dab in the center of Grants Pass, it's a great place for a visitor center. It's a great place for the bathrooms. The other uses that we're talking about there, whether it's a recreation office or other, it really doesn't matter very much where those offices are. It's nice, I suppose, to have that in conjunction maybe with the visitor center. But to me, when we're talking about priorities, what we want this building to do, as Aaron was saying, what do we want this building to do? We want it to serve the visitors, and I believe we also want it to provide bathrooms. I think also rendition number 6 with a larger front porch, I think because of where the building is downtown, and we have First Friday and we have other events, to have a larger porch there, I think is probably also fits in with that location and what we would really want the building to be able to be used for and known for. So to me, those would be the three top priorities. The bathrooms, the visitor center, and having some covered seating area, because 6 months of the year, the weather's not great here. So the rest of it could be kind of thrown into, we'll say, or shoehorned into whatever space is left over in there. But that, to me, would be the three things that we would want to, that I would like to see focused on in a design: the visitor center, the bathrooms, and a little bit larger front porch than number 4, more like what was on number 6.
So in regards to bathrooms, at one point we were talking about putting the Portland loos outside, but we do have bathrooms in this building. Is council interested in having staff pursue redesigning or reopening those restrooms? I'm seeing a nod from Rick. Brian?
So when we're talking about the Welcome Center restrooms, I don't know, I think I've talked to most or some of the counselors about this, but one of the ideas is to take some of that bathroom space, convert them into single stalls, give them exterior doors on the back of the building so that they're easily accessible to visitors or whoever needs to use a restroom. We don't need everybody coming into the visitor center to go to the bathroom. We can repurpose half of the bathroom space for the visitor center, and we can repurpose the other half for 3 or 4 exterior stalls that are just available for the general public to use. So when we're talking about the bathrooms, that's what I had in mind.
Rob, then Rick?
Yeah, and I agree with that, Brian. I'm not sure how an architect would deal with that, but some of the issues that we have now with people spending too much time in the bathrooms, as opposed, meaning hours and doing their laundry and whatever they do, I'm not sure if that can be, that concept may be, the Portland Loo concept, where you can essentially see when there's people in there, and make it limited uses for those stalls, meaning no sink inside and things of that nature. They may also be able to be included there so that we don't have the same types of problems with people spending hours in the bathrooms and so forth and causing damage. So the Portland Loo concept, I wonder if some of that could be incorporated into a redesign of that building itself. And as Brian was talking about, exterior doors, but maybe not a completely opaque situation, one where you get a sense of whether or not there's someone in there. So there's a lot to think about, but I'm sure we can improve the functionality of that building a lot by considering what Brian was saying about exterior doors in those bathrooms.
Rick, then Brian?
I also like the comments that Rob and Brian have said, and I would like to see a design to that effect. A lot of times you go to a motel, sometimes they don't have the sink inside the bathroom. The sink is actually out in with the bedroom. So I think that would help alleviate part of the problems with misuse of the bathrooms. And as Rob said, if we could design them so you could be visible, like the Portland Loo. When I did take a tour of the Welcome Center, I did notice the men's bathroom is quite extensive. It's almost like you're having a major event there and you have all these facilities where normally you don't have that level of activity there. So I don't know if those areas in a redesign could be repurposed and actually serve to a major advantage, just how it's been redesigned. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, just to follow up on Rob's points on the bathrooms, there's a lot that can be done to mitigate the kind of activity we don't want to see. We can put Portland Loo style doors on. We can make the stalls small enough to where, except for maybe the handicap accessible one, they're small enough to where people aren't feeling super comfortable in them. We could have an exterior sink. We don't have to have a sink in each bathroom. We could put, industrial grade fixtures in there that aren't going to break. We can put in the UV lights, that they put in some bathrooms and parks to discourage intravenous drug use. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can do to mitigate having issues in those bathrooms.
All right, so at this time, it sounds like we're interested in maybe redoing those bathrooms. Anybody want to object? Nobody's objecting.
Joel?
So the only thing that I object to is I'm not sure financially, I mean, we can do anything, right? It's kind of like with what we've done with the parks folks, you know, we can do this, and this. And oh, by the way, but it takes time and people, and it takes money, and we need to get it done. So just as long as we pay attention to that, what we're talking about here is more money. I would guess it would at least double, if not triple the cost, depending on what our modifications would be. And we just need to be careful of that and get it done.
Sounds like we need to find out what it might cost. Vanessa?
I'd like to add another request, Jason. I was recently in Coos Bay and I observed that their visitor center has solar panels. So I'd like us to make a phone call to them to see how they were able to accomplish that.
Noted.
All right, question, Jason?
So I think with all of these items, what I would propose is that I go ahead and get an architect on retainer so that they can come and look at the building. We can talk about the purposes, draw up some initial sketches, not spend a lot of money, but do some initial sketches, not a lot of detailed design work, and some budget level cost estimating to be able to come back to you with several options for you to choose from. I think Councilor King was right on target. The bathroom level may double or more the cost of the project than just the exterior remodel. And that's okay, but we just need to be prepared for what those are, and it may have to push another budget cycle to make that happen. So I'll start with a small effort with an architect. We'll come back with some sketches for you to choose from, and we'll go from there.
Sounds perfect. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
All right. New topic. Fire rescue automatic responses, and it looks like our Deputy Public Safety Chief, is that right? Lane Johnson?
Christmas trees are going to be fun.
Thanks for coming back so soon. We didn't scare you away last time, huh?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. What we're here to talk to you about today is to give you some background information on fire services in Josephine County and some of the recent changes that have occurred as a result of the failed effort to form a fire district and what those impacts are to us as an agency and to the city. And then to hopefully ask for a little bit of help from you folks in moving forward with asking for a request for some standards for private fire service in the unprotected areas. So with that, to provide the council with background information regarding structural fire service in the unprotected areas of Josephine County and adjacent to the city, and the relationship to council goals is to enhance community safety. First, let's start off with a few definitions to help kind of build the context for you. It can be a complicated subject. Unprotected areas means any area of the county or state that does not have fire protection, and in this case, typically that would be public fire protection or tax-based supported, like a fire district or municipality. Authority having jurisdiction means a responsible governing subdivision. When it comes to fire services, typically a municipal fire department, or in the county it would be a fire district that would have a board, or a special district, if you will. Mutual aid is a voluntary reciprocal request of exchange of fire resources and services for mutual benefit. Mutual aid agreements are a very common piece within the fire service. And as an extension of that, automatic aid is an agreement between 2 or more fire agencies to provide closest resources regardless of jurisdictional boundaries. And to expand on that a little bit, mutual and automatic aid agreements establish minimum requirements and expectations for joint interoperable operations and capabilities. Some examples would be for command and control. So we use the incident command system within the valley, communication systems, training equipment, etc. Mutual and automatic aid agreements establish authority having jurisdiction and provide liability expectations for the signers so that we're mutually protected and we know what to bring to the table. The authority having jurisdiction, like I said before, is typically a municipal fire department or a fire district. A little bit of background, structural fire service to the unprotected areas adjacent to the city are provided by competing contractual private fire service providers. This is done on an individual contract basis between the providers and individual property owners. This competitive condition is unique within the United States. It's not unique to have private fire service providers. There are not a lot of them, but it is unique to actually have a competitive market. Private fire service providers have no public oversight and lack government regulation or standards to ensure safe and effective operations. It really relies on them to do it through a voluntary compliance with industry practices. So there really is no standards out there or regulatory agency. Anyone in this room could essentially go into the private fire service right now and start selling contracts. Mutual and automatic aid agreements are essential fire service tools to provide effective and efficient, or cost-efficient and safe services for our communities. No one fire department can stand on its own anymore, that we really do rely heavily on mutual and automatic aid. Continuing the background, long-standing conditions have recently reached a critical point with the failure of the recent county recommended fire district vote. It had always been our hope that the community out there would choose to go fire district. This is the second attempt that's been made in the last 10 or 15 years. We're also seeing a sharp increase in wildfire danger and severity within our community. Increase in the competitive nature of the market is contrary to working in mutual support. So public-based agencies have reason and cause to actually be mutually supportive. There's no competitive nature to it. Private fire service, they are competing entities for a market, and they won't actually want to give their services away to the other agency. It's contrary. That's why you see in most instances that any critical public safety service like fire and police aren't typically privatized, they're part of the public venue. Despairing differences in capabilities of private providers. This is also true for public agencies. Not all fire departments are created equal. You'll get them across the span, but there are some minimum expectations and standards in their ability to provide services. In the area of private realm, you get what you pay for. Lack of public oversight or having a designated referee. As it stands now, there is no government entity or jurisdiction of authority that's refereeing the conditions out there. So it is a free market base, and it can be different at times. Increased regulation of public fire service providers. Every year we are constantly seeing increases in the regulations that are placed on us as public agencies, both from a safety and operational and liability standpoint. And increased threat to public and firefighter safety due to a lack of clear command control on incidents, and I will expand on that. So command and control of a scene is essential to public and firefighter safety to timely control fires. This is where we go in and the authority having jurisdiction actually establishes command because they have the right to do so, and then all the follow-on agencies or cooperators are working under one clear direction of who is responsible for it. Not having clear authority, having jurisdiction or regulation can delay establishing command and control, which can delay initial actions on the incident. Assumption of liability for all persons or entities working the incident. And what that means is that if I arrive on scene and I establish command and control and I start issuing out direction to partner agencies, I'm assuming responsibility for those decisions in that direction. Safety of public and firefighters opposing or an uncoordinated action. So if you have more than one agency arrive and they all decide to take independent action, it's not under a clear command and control, you're putting folks at risk. Delayed initial attack on a fire. This is the increased chance of loss of life or property while determining contractual ownership, which really in terms of the unprotected area, that's how you clearly establish you as authority, because it's done through the individual contracts with property owners. It's not a public-based right, if you will. So a little bit about regional fire services to add some more context. So the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs Mutual Aid Agreement was established in the 1950s and was recently updated in 2020 between 20 public agencies and 1 private fire agency. Only 1 private fire service provider has voluntarily met the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs minimum requirements to be a signer of the two county mutual aid agreement. And the reason that the chiefs have done this is because with the failure of the local jurisdiction having authority to either pass a fire district and or to set some standards, we felt it was necessary to protect the interests of the public entities that are part of the mutual aid agreement, and so we established some minimum standards. And when I mean we as the fire chiefs, and we're a representative body or agency to that body. Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs is not the authority having jurisdiction, and its requirements for private fire service providers is not a tenable long-term solution. So this was a temporary solution to get us through because we all have the same intent, and that is providing great public service to the entire region and our local communities. And then for clarification, Josephine County Commissioners are the governing subdivision and are the ones who have the authority having jurisdiction for this area. So with all that said, the call to actions, the council's discretion, what I am looking for is to submit a request to the Josephine County Board of Commissioners to develop and adopt standards for private fire service providers in Josephine County to support effective and safe regional services. This has been done through the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs Association. I have done it as the Josephine County Fire Defense Board Chief, and there have been several of the public agencies within Josephine County who have also submitted this. This would be the first request to our governing body to the authority to do the same. Alternatives is to stay the current course and take no action, and to move to additional workshops. And with that, I am happy to address any questions I can.
What questions do you have, Council? Joel?
So from your presentation, I assume that our firefighters are at increased risk to the unknown chain of command upon arriving on a scene and jurisdiction?
They can, yes. And we adjust for that by training them to be anticipatory of that and making sure our supervisors are in the field, and then in addition with our close working relationship with Rural Metro.
But there is an increased risk there to our firefighters that we're responsible for, is what I heard you say?
Correct. There's an increased risk to all firefighters on all
The second
sides.
thing I heard you say was there is a increased risk of, because of the situation and the lack of standards of our initial attack not being the best that it could be, and that might put property values at risk, including with the mega fire situation that during the initial attack when things have to run fairly smoothly to be successful, that could affect other property owners in the city as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, then Valerie.
Thank you, Lang. I just had a question about, in Josephine County, what other public fire agencies are there? I know there's Illinois Valley Fire District. Are there any others?
Yes, so there's Wolf Creek Rural Fire Protection District out in Wolf Creek. Then there's the Williams Rural Fire Protection District out in Williams. There's the Illinois Valley Fire Protection District. And then the Applegate Fire District, which is predominantly in Jackson County, also has a portion of Josephine County that kind of takes up that area between Murphy and Williams.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. In addition to that, then you also have the Oregon Department of Forestry, which then does the wildland protection for the majority of public and private lands.
Valerie?
Yeah, I just want clarification, because one thing that was one of the bullets, go back to the regional fire services, because you read it differently than it's here. It says Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs Mutual Aid Agreement established in the 1950s and updated in 2020 between, you said 20 public and 1 private, is that correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
21 agencies altogether.
So, and one of those, and that is Rural Metro, is the one that is a part of that agreement, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vanessa?
You had mentioned that private fire service providers have no public oversight and lack government regulation or standards. Can you talk about some of the standards that Grants Pass Fire Rescue is proud to uphold that maybe other private agencies don't have to?
I can add a little bit to that. So OSHA has predominantly the main regulatory responsibility that would have a crossover between the two. For us as a public entity, we're held to a higher standard than the private entities are, and typically the private entities are more subject to it when there is an accident or an injury that occurs, rather than public entities which have more scrutiny. Beyond that, then you're talking about NFPA standards for apparatus, NFPA standards for training, standards for public safety and training through the state, through DPSST. All of those come into play in terms of what we're being held accountable to. And then on top of that, then you have our labor management agreements, which then tie in a lot of those regulatory things as well. So there's a whole plethora of stuff that we as public agencies need to be aware of and in compliance with, that our private partners out there or private entities don't necessarily have to comply with.
Thank you.
Rob?
So in your opinion, if you would even go there, is there a reason that the Josephine County Board of Commissioners or prior boards have not developed standards like this?
They've been under consideration for well over a decade now, and it's just been a lack of actually making the action happen. And it could be political in nature, it could be any number of reasons with the different bodies that have been in place and have taken under consideration. They have made attempts over the years to bring on subcommittees or specific task groups to work on that and make recommendations, but not in every case did they follow through with the recommendations were made.
Vanessa?
Yeah, to follow up on that question, I was going to ask, you had mentioned that this request has been made 2 other times, and I wanted to know what the response was from the county.
In the situation between the Fire Defense Board and the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs, those were made back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, and then repeated expressions of interest to see that happen led to the most recent effort by the county to form the Fire Standards, or not Fire Standards Committee, but the Fire Committee that met and then made recommendation to move towards a fire district. The fire district is the ultimate answer. In lieu of not having a fire district, then standards are the next best option.
Thank you.
Do you have any data or even maybe just a sense of how frequently we provide aid outside of the city as opposed to how we go about accepting aid inside of the city?
Yeah, we watch those numbers pretty closely because we want them to be as reciprocal as possible. Sometimes they weigh heavily onto their side where we're going out into the county more often. Sometimes they're more into the city. It just varies on the nature of the calls, but typically we rely on rural metro more for extra staffing and depth for our greater alarms, and then they rely on us to help assist with more of the medical aids that are closer to within city limits, and often closer to our stations than they are to their stations.
Are there very many circumstances in which you would make it as far out to one of the other fire districts, like Illinois Valley or Williams?
Oh, absolutely. So we not only have a mutual aid agreement with Rural Metro, which also includes automatic aid, which is programmed into our CAD system. So that way we don't worry about jurisdictional boundaries. We worry about where the closest station's at. In that same vein, we do the same thing with our other fire district partners. So Rogue River, Wolf Creek, Illinois Valley, Williams. We're all part of that mutual aid agreement, and we will share and exchange those resources on a regular basis. So by way of example, some of the recent calls we had last week where we were tying up our resources and fighting fires in town or over in Rogue River, it wouldn't be unusual for those other agencies to move units into Grants Pass to backfill our units, and then vice versa.
And are you currently providing mutual aid for all calls outside of the city?
A large portion of them, but not all. We will base it on life safety, specifically if there's an imminent threat to life, and or whether there's availability for their units.
Okay.
And vice versa, they do the same for us.
Because it's my understanding we don't know what the jurisdiction is for some of those locations outside of the city until we're on site, determining whether or not they even have private service subscription.
There is a difference between jurisdiction and then having authority for the property in specific. So when it comes for private fire agencies, they can declare a service area, which kind of would be synonymous with what we would consider a jurisdiction. But it is not a government or it's not a permanent line or circle, if you will, of area that they're responding to. They can opt to go and do what they wish. Most of their authority comes specifically with having a contractual agreement with a property owner.
Okay. Other questions? Joel?
So I was just curious, and we don't need to take a whole lot more time, but so if somebody, a landowner that's outside our jurisdiction, outside the city limits, has no fire coverage, no private fire provider, then is the default fire provider in jurisdiction ODF?
Depending on the nature of a call, because ODF does not provide structural fire
Right.
services. If it is wildland in nature and during the fire season, then ODF will obviously respond and will be
Just because of the wildland fire, not because of the structure?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then most of those properties are going to have a fee to ODF through their tax base as part of their assessment for those particular service. When it comes to structural fire protection, if the home does not, or the property owner does not have a contract with a private service provider, then it's really which provider gets there first. And then they have the option to continue to engage and fight that fire or not to engage at all. Rural Metro's stance has been since its inception that they're going to fight all fires and engage because of the life safety issues that are involved. And we follow on with that as part of the traditions of the fire service. That's
So
what
what's our legal obligation then under mutual aid if they don't have any coverage and the other private companies decide it's not in their best interest? What's our legal obligation?
Yeah, none.
None, okay.
Valerie?
Which brings us to where we're basically endangered because nobody takes command of those. Is that what you're saying? I mean, is that what I'm hearing in a situation like that? If you don't have somebody who necessarily has the same standards or knows what those standards are, then you feel that your people are endangered when that happens. Am I correct?
It can.
Okay.
So to be perfectly clear in ways, I've been working in the county, even going back as long as when I worked for Rural Metro, is that this is where the conflict between a public service interferes with the business sense of being a private business and then competition. The private business sense says if you're not part of our subscriptions and you don't want our services, then you're on your own. But the fire service part of it is that if there's a potential life that could be lost in that house, or that house continuing to burn may represent a threat to the neighboring houses, which can be contracts, then the best interest is to actually go in and take action. So Rural Metro, by its nature and business model, will always take action. That's contrary to the competitive nature of the business. And it's one of the reasons that has endeared them to us and to the rest of the fire service within the region to continue to partner with them.
Thank you for that.
So what we're talking about here is actually sustaining and supporting that effort.
Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to submit a request to the Josephine County Board of Commissioners to develop and adopt standards for private fire service providers in Josephine County to support effective and safe regional fire services.
Second from Vanessa, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Brian?
Well, you beat me to it, Rob. I was actually hoping to strengthen that motion a little bit by seeing if we can get the other public agencies in Josephine County to sign on to the request before we send it to them. I thought it would have a little bit more weight if, all the other fire agencies were signatories on that letter before it went to them. So I would ask to amend to add that piece if Chief Johnson thinks that would be wise.
More is not necessarily better or worse. I will say that most of those agencies, actually all of those agencies through the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs have already done that.
That's fair. I think it would, as they're looking at it, if they were all at the bottom, I think it could help.
Certainly wouldn't hurt to ask.
Vanessa?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I also support this motion. It's pretty, the ask is pretty common sense. When asked Deputy Chief Johnson essentially what safety standards the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, DPSST, the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, these are really common sense asks for just baseline safety in the community.
Any other discussion? Joel?
Well, just in quick summary, it protects firefighter safety if we have those standards that are uniform, and second, it protects property even better. So it's a no-brainer.
All right, let's see, we had Rob made the motion, I believe? Okay, how do you vote, Rob?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. We'll write a letter, and how about, in light of Councilor De La Grange's request, we can also just send that letter to the other departments and let them know that we're doing this if they want to also reaffirm with their own letter part of this discussion.
I will be happy to reach out to them and see their interest in participating.
Sounds good. And then Council President Fazier and City Manager and I meet with the county commissioners monthly, so we'll put it on our agenda to talk about with them next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, that brings us to agenda review. And our next workshop is next Monday, where we are discussing the Climate Task Force, system development charges and construction excise tax, Washington Lawn Ridge Conservation District. That's a motion from the Historic Building Sites Commission. Injunction Park impacts, that is actually a discussion about sanitation in the parks, having to do with homeless camping. And then an executive session regarding both labor and property real estate discussion, unrelated to each other. Valerie?
I just had a question on the system development charge and construction excise tax. I think that was at one point, the Housing Committee addressed that, and so I don't know if there's going to be anybody there. And I'm assuming with the Lawn Ridge Conservation District that there will be somebody from HSBC so both of those will have somebody from committees?
Yes, both Chair Walker from HAC and Chair Warren will be attending.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this week? And then next Wednesday, we have a meeting that includes a public hearing to discuss an ordinance for transit hub restrooms, a public hearing on an ordinance that would amend Development Code Articles 12, 14, 30 pertaining to social services facilities. Second reading on the Development Code discussion from last week that just did not pass unanimously. Resolution to sell the property at 202 Northwest A Street, over here in the corner of 5th and A. Council action item on a resolution for the Summerfield North Stormwater SDC credit, a resolution that would change order number 3 for change order number 3 J Street cleanup. I don't know what that is. A resolution on House Bill 2003 Housing Production Strategy, a resolution on Sobering Center Financial Assistance, a resolution on Housing Production Strategy Program, a resolution on creating a parking enforcement job classification, and some appointments to the Bikeways, Walkways Committee, as well as Committee on Public Arts, COPA. What is the resolution change order number 3 J Street cleanup?
Jason, the J Street cleanup?
Yeah, the J Street cleanup, that's the site for the future water treatment plant, and change order number 3 exceeds the authority of myself and the city manager to sign. We need to get that in front of you. It is, I'm just going to spoiler it, it's significant. Amount of, for lack of a better, garbage that we found underground is staggering. So we'll be bringing that to you on that night.
Okay, like the property has been used as a landfill?
Yes.
Oh dear. Okay, any other questions? Brian and then Valerie?
I just have a general question. It's not on that particular meeting. Should I save it or just go now?
Go ahead and go.
Okay. I had a question about our booth at the fair this weekend. First of all, I was wondering if it's inside or outside. Inside, okay. All right, that's good,
It's
thanks.
right inside the commercial building, and we actually have a little AC unit that we have there, so you're not going to fry too bad. And a lot of times they'll put a huge fan right by the door there, so it's not terrible. And also, since I'm on that, we have T-shirts up in admin if you'd like to have one to wear at fair.
Great, thank you.
You're not going to fry, it's a slow bake. Valerie?
Yes, I was just, Resolution HB 2003 Housing Production Strategy. I just was wondering what exactly that entailed.
So the Department of Land Conservation Development has a technical assistance program where they provide assistance through housing consultants to apply with House Bill 2003, which mandates that mid and large size jurisdictions like ourselves have a housing production strategy. The ORS outlines what's in it, but it's pretty involved. So this would be a no cost pass through kind of thing. Situation for us.
Oh, all right. And is that tied in with the other one down below? Because there's 2.
They're duplicates, I believe.
Are they duplicates? That's what I was curious about. If
Yeah.
They're one and the same. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Things you want added? Valerie?
Never mind. I saw on the August thing. I was just wondering when we were going to have a discussion on legal service.
All right. Motion to adjourn? Valerie?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Rob, let me hold your finger. Thank you. Second from Rob. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. See you next Monday or at the fair.
When are you doing? Saturday. Yeah. What time?